what I think is one of the great moments is at my wedding. And that's when all the frailties of many a local bell ringer came to the fore. We decided to get married in Kingsnipton. And it was lovely because Anthony was married from where Paul Heaton, used to live. That was the house she was married from. And she was picked up by Bill Hill in his Daimler car. Bill used to live up at Beer Farm, and he had an old Daimler. And he picked her up with a proper flag from there, drove up and around where Chris Ponder lives now once, and then dropped her outside the church. Yeah. And she then walked in, and it was beautiful really, because a lot of the village, and not as a tribute to me, I think to my mother and the family, there was an awful lot of them lined right up along the paths and that. And I just thought it was incredible. And we walked in, and the service was performed by Reverend Farmerlow, who was the then rector. We came out, and then we went across the church hall for the reception. And lots of people are sort of called in with a flan they'd made. They don't call them quiches in those days, it was a flan. Here, have a flan, Mrs. Sanders. There's a few, somebody else we got, It was wonderful. And we had the reception, and it was a glorious day. And the bell ringers, in those days, they either took a fee, it might have been £15 or something, or £20, or if you invited them to the reception, they would forego the fee. And my brother put himself in charge of many things, because he was the best man. He put himself in charge of the punch. Now, he used to brew his own homemade wine, which, well, I don't know what proof it was, but it would take the lining off anything. And there was rough cider as well, and I think a little bit of lemonade went in. And this concoction was arrived at, which was the staple drink of the wedding. And all the while the bell ringers drank. And then at 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock, in those days the bride and groom used to leave, and we drove off to High Bullen, where we spent our wedding night. And the bell ringer said us to ring ye off. So we were a bit puzzled when we came out, because it was going dingle dang, dingle dang, dangle dingle dang, ding dang dang dang, dingle dangle dang dang. And my brother went across to have a look, and they were hardly able to stand. They couldn't let go of the ropes. And our old Chug, apparently his trousers fell down, he had to pull him up again whilst holding on to the bell rope, and said, "I've done it." And they said, "What's that?" He said, "She's in the way again," because Pam was pregnant again.
But wasn't there a story with the bell ringers about how, was it Margaret Westcott had to go in and tell them to stop?
Oh yes, forgive me.
Yeah.
They didn't stop ringing. You see, normally if you ring the people off, but they couldn't stop. They couldn't let go, see? They couldn't let go of the ropes. So in the end, I think Margaret and Sheila, and they were a doughty couple, went up, and Sheila had nothing to do with it, because Will Westcott wasn't a ringer, but I think she went along to add support. Margaret went in there and said, "Right, enough! Get on, out you go." Ah, dear. And then Harold, with several others, went up to the Grove. And he went in there, and she said, Bess Constable said, "Do you want anything?" He said, "No, thank you." And he got in the window seat and went to sleep. And Bess Constable said these immortal words, "If you didn't drink it here, you're not sleeping it off here. So get out." And meanwhile, the Reverend Farmerlow had decided to drive, for reasons best known to himself, his car to Huxford. To this day we had no reason why he did it. I can still see his berry was over his eye like this. And he parked his car on Huxford Hill outside and went in. Just left it there. And Charlie Clark, I think, decided to mow the lawn and fell over. Fred Eyre couldn't get home properly. And such was the Sanders wedding, which incidentally was 50 years ago, a fortnight this Saturday.
I can remember it still. I remember the party in the...
Yeah, and do you know what they used to call it in Devon? They used to call it the rattle of the bucket. And that was always the party after, where people had their most fun, because the bride and groom had gone. And me and Anthea were over at bloody High Bullen. having quite an expensive meal, listening to this going across. You could hear it across the valley. It was just dancing and playing and this, that and the other. It was marvellous. People laughing. And there was me and Anthea. Then I decided to go upstairs and have a bath, and I got into the bath, filled it up, got in, and I couldn't find how to get rid of the water. Because I wasn't used to, I was used to a chain going down with a plug. And there wasn't a bloody chain or a plug at all. And I sat there for quite a long time, and the water was getting coloured because of the stuff coming off me, the confetti. And finally I thought, well, I got to ask Anthony. I stood up and I leant on something, and all the water went. And then we got into bed, and Mrs. Tomlin had made us a apple pie bed. And that's when you fold the bottom sheet over and back again. So when you get in, you can't put your feet back. So there we are. And then we came back to the village the next day. And I'd hired from Jack Short, supposedly a doormobile from a friend of his. And when it turned out, it was like a cattle lorry with windows, a Pantechnicon. And we were going to drive round Cornwall. And the last thing he said was, Roland, be careful with the fridge. It's on. Always park on horizontal ground or it will blow up. And like a fool, you see, I didn't think of turning the bloody thing off. And I drove miles and miles and miles trying to find a campsite to park this bloody thing. And then we drove off. We went to spend the second week of our honeymoon up in Mersey near Colchester, because my aunt had a house, Anthony's aunt had a houseboat there, and we drove as far as Salisbury in my Austin A30 car, and second and third gears went. So I was left with first and fourth. So I turned around and drove back again. And to drive back all that way in first and fourth was quite a considerable thing, because to change from first to fourth took a lot of bloody doing. And everybody was surprised to see us back again. And that was it. The wedding.